Through the rain to Bear Lake, Mich and Mark's Highway 97 adventure. The morning light over Prince George was dim and silvery, the kind of overcast that made the edges of buildings blur into the sky. A steady curtain of rain tapped on the motel's awning, dripping into shallow puddles in the parking lot. Mich stood next to the Harley-Davidson, zipping her bright blue rainsuit all the way to her chin. She glanced over at Mark, who was tightening his gloves, his own rain gear a matching cobalt that gleamed wet in the light. Do we really have to look like matching blueberries? Better matching blueberries than soaked raisins? Besides, this bike doesn't care what we look like as long as we keep her rolling. They had a long day ahead, all the way to Fort St. John. But first was the stretch from Prince George to Bear Lake. A ride that would take them deep into the damp, rugged beauty of northern British Columbia. The rain wasn't going to give them a break, and the slick asphalt of Highway 97 waited with its own set of challenges. Mark guided the Harley out of the parking lot, the tires kind of hissing over the wet pavement, with Mich leaning into him from behind. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the subtle vibration of the engine through their layers of rain gear. Prince George, often called the northern capital of British Columbia, quickly faded behind them. It was a city built at the confluence of the Fraser and Nechako rivers, a hub for forestry and rail transport. Mich glanced at the surrounding spruce and pine as they passed the city's edges, the trees looking darker and denser under the gray sky. The rain didn't so much fall as it slanted in sheets wind pushing it sideways across the highway. Water pooled in the ruts left by years of truck tires. Mark kept the Harley steady, avoiding the deep puddles where hydroplaning could turn a ride into a skid. Feels like we're riding through a car wash. Yeah, except the car wash is moving at 90 kilometers an hour and the dryer's broken. They were now on the Hart Highway portion of Highway 97, named after John Hart, a premier of British Columbia in the 1940s. This stretch was a lifeline for communities far north, carrying logging trucks, RVs, and travelers chasing the Yukon or Alaska. The pavement shimmered black and silver in the rain, the double yellow line blurred under the spray kicked up by passing vehicles. That guy's basically making his own storm up there. Rule 1 in the rain, never trust a big rig's wake. The land here opened up in stretches before tightening again into forest corridors. Even in the bad weather, there was a raw beauty to the north. The air smelled of wet pine, earth, and the faint tang of diesel from the occasional convoy of trucks. As they rode, the steady rhythm of rain on their helmets became almost hypnotic. So, when we get to Bear Lake, what's the first thing we do? Mark says check the bike, then maybe find a hot coffee. And, he's ordering something fried. You? Mich says coffee first, then maybe fried and sweet, like a donut. Because, well, donuts are basically fried joy. Speaking of joy, Bear Lake isn't just a lake, it's a whole little community. They say it's a popular spot for fishing and camping in the summer. Pike, rainbow trout, if we weren't on a schedule we could stop and try our luck. Yeah, I can totally picture us, 2 soaked blueberries fishing in the rain. The fish wouldn't even notice us. The rain had been falling long enough to make the road surface unpredictable. Some patches gleamed like glass, others were pocked with shallow potholes filled with muddy water. Every so often, a small stream crossed the road where drainage ditches overflowed. Mark adjusted his riding line constantly, eyes scanning for hazards, a habit drilled into him after years of riding. This is the part people don't think about. They see the freedom of riding, the wind in your face. But in weather like this, it's all about focus. And trust. I trust you completely out here. Northern British Columbia in midsummer meant wildlife was always a possibility, and not just deer. Moose, black bears, even the occasional caribou could step onto the highway without warning. The rain reduced visibility, making it even more important to keep speeds in check. You know, if a moose came out right now, I think we'd both just scream in perfect harmony. I wouldn't scream, I'd make a very manly warning sound. Oh, like, Exactly, the key is to keep it dignified. They passed a road sign warning of moose crossings for the next several kilometers. Mich scanned the tree line, half expecting to see a shadow moving between the trunks. The forest here felt endless, its edges shrouded in mist. About halfway to Bear Lake, the rain picked up, hammering their visors and drumming on the Harley's fuel tank. The bike's tires hissed louder and the wind tugged at them in unpredictable bursts. This rain's trying to tell us to pull over. We don't stop until Bear Lake. It was part stubbornness, part determination. On rides like this, every decision carried weight, and they decided together before leaving Prince George that Bear Lake was their first break. Despite the weather, there was something hauntingly beautiful about the ride. Low clouds drifted between the hills, the treetops fading into gray. Occasionally the forest would part to reveal a view of distant ridges, their outlines softened by rain. That river's been here for thousands of years, carried gold prospectors, fur traders, log rafts, and now a couple of damp motorcyclists. We're basically part of history now. The kilometers ticked down slowly, each one a little victory over the weather and the road. When they finally saw the sign for Bear Lake, Mich let out a cheer in the comms. Never thought I'd be so happy to see a town name. The rain was still falling, though it had eased slightly. Mark guided the Harley into the small community, passing modest houses, a few local businesses, and glimpses of the lake itself. Its surface a sheet of pewter under the overcast sky. Bear Lake wasn't large, but it had a charm that even the rain couldn't hide. Known as a recreational spot, it was the kind of place where summer weekends brought campers, anglers, and hikers. In winter, snowmobilers and cross-country skiers took over. They pulled into a gravel turnout overlooking the water, the Harley's tires crunching softly. Mich swung her leg over and stood for the first time since Prince George, stretching her stiff knees. 3 words: coffee, food, dry. Agreed, let's find a place to thaw out. They removed their helmets, their hair damp from the humid air inside. The lake stretched out before them, serene despite the weather, the kind of place that made the hardship of the ride feel worth it. From Bear Lake to Mackenzie, Mich and Mark are still riding through the storm. The rain showed no mercy. As Mich and Mark rolled out of Bear Lake without stopping, the world around them seemed carved entirely from shades of gray, blurred edges and constant motion. Water streamed across their visors, wind hissed in their ears, and honestly the Harley's V-twin Thunder was the only thing that felt solid in an otherwise shifting liquid world. Mark's shoulders were hunched forward as he gripped the handlebars, the tension in his posture saying what he didn't bother to yell over the rain. This is serious business now. Mich, tucked in behind him, could feel every vibration through the seat, her knees gripping the sides of the bike for stability. Her gloved hands rested lightly on his sides, more for reassurance than necessity. She leaned slightly to peek past him at the water-slicked road ahead, watching the painted lines fade and reappear under the splashing mist from the tires. Mark, you are sure this rain can't get any worse, right? Oh, trust me, British Columbia always has another gear when it comes to rain. I thought that was Seattle's department. Seattle inherited it from BC, he shot back, eyes scanning for the faint reflective signs along Highway 97. The stretch between Bear Lake and Mackenzie was notorious for its remoteness. Trees crowded the shoulders of the road, their trunks dark with moisture, branches heavy with dripping needles. The rain had turned the scenery into a layered watercolor painting, soft edges, muted colors, and shifting shades of green and black. Occasionally they'd pass small signs warning of moose crossings, and each one felt like an unspoken dare from nature. With visibility so low, the idea of one of those massive creatures stepping into their path wasn't far-fetched. It was, actually pretty likely. Think we'll see a moose? Let's hope not, especially not up close. Moose don't bounce off Harleys, Harleys bounce off moose. I can't imagine trying to swerve in this. We just end up sliding. Yup, so eyes up, stay ready. And if one runs out, we're both yelling the same word. What word? Brakes, not moose. I don't want to know what it is, I want to stop before I know what it is. By now, their blue rain suits were slick and glistening like fresh paint beads of water constantly skittering down their sleeves and pant legs. Every now and then, a droplet would sneak past Mich's collar, trickling cold against her neck. The Harley's windshield carried its own ever-changing pattern of rivulets, each drop catching a flash of light before flinging off to the side. The rain wasn't just falling, it was blowing, it was curling sideways in gusts that rattled their helmets and nudged the bike. Mark leaned instinctively into the wind's push, keeping the machine steady while Mich tightened her grip just a bit more. I think the rain likes you. Oh, this is love, Mich. It's hugging me from every direction. Just wait. When we get to Mackenzie, it'll send you a postcard. Highway 97, also called the John Hart Highway in this region, was their lifeline. Stretching north from Prince George toward the Peace River country, it cut through some of British Columbia's wildest, least forgiving terrain. Here, civilization felt like a distant rumor. Logging trucks were the kings of the road, huge, looming shapes that could appear suddenly in the mist, their headlights glowing like twin suns before roaring past in a spray of water. Fun fact: Highway 97 is the longest continuously numbered route in British Columbia. It runs over 2,000 kilometers from the US border right up to the Yukon. So basically, we're just a tiny little blip on it right now? Exactly, a soggy little blip. There were these long stretches where they saw no other vehicles, just the dark, slick highway unwinding ahead, and the deep forest pressing in. The road surface was patchy in places, potholes kind of disguised under puddles, and honestly, each time Mark's front tire sent up an extra high splash, Mich's stomach tightened. "How's visibility for you?" Mark says. "Bad enough that I'm trusting the white line like it's my best friend. Don't even want to think about what it's like behind me." Mich replies, "It's like sitting in a washing machine with an engine strapped to it." And then Mark goes, "That's the spirit." Somewhere past the halfway point, the rain's intensity shifted. It didn't stop, it just changed, turning from a constant sheet into a rhythmic drumming that felt more manageable. Their headlights lit up the mist in front of them like a curtain, making the road seem both infinite and intimate at once. Mich found herself thinking about the town ahead. Mackenzie, a small community surrounded by wilderness built in the 1960s to service the forestry industry. She'd read somewhere that it was home to the world's largest tree crusher, a massive machine once used to clear land for reservoirs. You know, Mackenzie has this giant tree crusher. It's just sitting there now, rusting, but it's a local landmark. Figures. If we see it tonight, it'll just look like a blurry wet blob. Everything looks like a blurry wet blob right now. As they drew closer to Mackenzie Junction, where the turnoff from Highway 97 led into town, fatigue began to nibble at the edges of their concentration. Riding in heavy rain wasn't just uncomfortable, it was mentally exhausting. Every second required vigilance, every movement had to be deliberate. "I'm going to kiss the ground when we stop." "Don't, it's probably covered in mud." The last stretch into town felt like riding into a ghost story. The rain softened again, but the sky remained an unbroken black, no moon, no stars, just the diffuse glow of the bike's headlamp on wet pavement. Finally, the sign for Mackenzie emerged from the dark, its reflective letters gleaming in the beam like a promise kept. They rolled into town without incident, tires hissing against the soaked road, rain still pattering on their helmets. The sight of streetlights felt almost luxurious after the black void of the highway. Well, we didn't hit a moose, and the Harley didn't turn into a submarine. I call that a win. The rain had not let up for a second since they'd left Prince George that morning. By the time Mich and Mark rolled out of Mackenzie, the wet had seeped into every fiber of their blue rain suits, even if they wouldn't admit it out loud. The Harley's engine rumbled beneath them with a steady confidence, a reminder that rain or shine, it was built for the long haul. Mark sat up front, shoulders squared, gripping the bars with a quiet determination. Mich was snugged in behind him, arms looped around his waist, her cheek brushing against the damp fabric of his jacket every time the wind shifted. The visor on her helmet was slick with droplets, and every time she turned her head, the world smeared into watery streaks of green, gray, and the occasional flash of the double yellow lines marking the highway. Highway 29 stretched ahead, a winding ribbon threading through dense forest, rolling hills, and distant ridgelines. If it weren't for the relentless curtain of rain, the scenery might have looked postcard perfect. Even through the haze, Mich could make out the towering pines, their dark boughs bending slightly under the weight of water, and the occasional birch tree, its pale bark almost glowing in the dim light. The air smelled sharp, like pine needles crushed underfoot and the clean mineral scent of rain hitting soil. Every now and then, Mark's front tire sliced through a shallow puddle, sending a cool spray out to the sides. You know, I think we're basically riding through the set of a survival movie right now. Yeah, except in those movies the main characters usually have a truck or something with a roof. Or at least windshield wipers. I've got my own built-in wipers. It's called blinking. You blink too much, you'll miss a moose crossing the road. If a moose comes out of this mist, you're the one up front. I'm just a passenger in the splash zone. The road between Mackenzie and Chetwynd was wild country. Mich had read somewhere that this part of British Columbia had some of the most untouched stretches of boreal forest left in Canada. Here the forest wasn't just scenery, it was a living, breathing presence. The trees closed in on both sides of the highway, forming this green tunnel, and every now and then, the land opened up into swampy lowlands dotted with stunted spruce and deep pools of standing water. Mark leaned slightly into a curve and Mich caught sight of a small beaver lodge jutting up from the edge of a pond just off the road. The water around it rippled in the rain, 1,000 tiny rings chasing each other into nothing. Somewhere out there, she imagined a beaver family tucked warm and dry inside, probably wondering why two humans on a loud chrome beast were charging through a storm like this. You know, beavers mate for life. Mark's voice echoed in her mind. Is that a hint? Mich replied, not unless you're planning to start building dams, but it's kind of sweet. They stick together, even in bad weather. Maybe we should take notes. We're already riding hundreds of kilometers through a storm. I think we've got the commitment thing covered. The Harley's tires hummed over the wet asphalt. Now and then, they'd pass a lonely road sign marking distances to Chetwynd, though the numbers felt like they were barely shrinking. The ride wasn't just about covering miles, it was about braving the elements, and that meant each kilometer demanded its own quiet victory. As they climbed a gentle rise, the rain thickened, hammering against their rain suits like handfuls of tossed gravel. Mich pressed closer, her hands tightening around Mark's waist. This is officially what I call premium-level Harley bonding time. Is that what you call it? I was thinking of calling it soaked to the bone and loving it. Speak for yourself. My socks have declared war on me. I think they're trying to escape my boots. The humor helped, but the ride demanded focus. The visibility had dropped to a few dozen meters ahead, just enough to keep an eye out for wildlife or sharp turns. Mark was careful on the throttle, easing off whenever the road curved or dipped. Every so often, the landscape offered something unexpected. They passed a small logging site, stacks of freshly cut timber shining wet under the gray sky, the smell of raw cedar briefly overpowering the damp air. A few kilometers later, a side road disappeared into the trees, a faded sign pointing toward a remote fishing camp. Imagine spending a week in one of those cabins. Fireplace, warm blankets, maybe a canoe. Sounds great, except right now I'm imagining dry socks more than canoes. The stretch near Moberly Lake Junction offered a rare glimpse of wide-open space. The lake itself, though shrouded in mist, seemed to stretch forever, a steel-gray mirror broken only by the wind-driven ripples. Somewhere out there, Mich knew, fish swam lazily, unaware of the rain hammering above. You know, this lake is said to be home to a water monster. Kind of like the Loch Ness Monster, but Canadian. Great, so if we break down, we're either dealing with moose or lake monsters. Good to know. You just keep finding ways to make this ride more interesting. Kilometer by kilometer, the miles to Chetwynd slipped away. The highway began to roll more dramatically, the land swelling into low mountains and ridges. The rain, relentless as ever, made the greens of the forest deeper, richer, like the trees themselves were thriving in the downpour. Then came a stretch where the asphalt curved along a hillside, the land falling away on their right to reveal a deep valley where a river snaked its way through the pines. Even through the mist, Mich could see the silver ribbon of water cutting through the dark green, a sight so quietly beautiful, she forgot for a moment about the rain dripping inside her gloves. Worth the ride? Yeah, totally worth it.
Just outside of Chetwynd, British Columbia. You guys wanted...
Where are we?
Almost in Chetwynd, British Columbia. You guys wanted rugged and rocky? Look at this. This is nothing. This is just a footnote. This is amazing. Here we go.
The road ahead stretched out from Chetwynd like a ribbon of gray asphalt cutting through northern British Columbia's rugged terrain. The rain had eased just after they'd rolled out of town, leaving behind a damp world where every surface gleamed. The clouds still hung low and heavy, shifting in shades of silver and pale charcoal, but the break in precipitation felt like a blessing. Mich adjusted her position slightly on the back of the Harley, leaning into the gentle sway of the bike as Mark guided it along Highway 97. The air was cool and carried that fresh, earthy smell that follows a downpour, petrichor mixed with the faint aroma of pine resin. Water still dripped from the edges of their helmets, but the rhythmic drip, drip, on their visors was nothing compared to the constant smearing of rain they'd endured earlier in the day. Feels weird not hearing the rain in my ears. Yeah, it's like riding without someone tapping on your head the whole time. I don't miss it. I bet the bike doesn't miss it either. Harley's probably as happy as we are. If it had a voice, it would be saying, "Finally, I can breathe." The closer they got to the Hudson's Hope Junction, the more dramatic the scenery became. Massive walls of rock rose along the roadside, streaked with mineral colors, rusty reds, deep browns, and pale grays. The road curved around these formations, sometimes hugging their base so closely that the Harley's engine echoed back at them in short bursts. This place feels ancient. It is. These rocks have been here for millions of years. We're just passing through. Past the turnoff, the road widened and the traffic picked up slightly. More trucks now, a sign they were approaching a busier hub. The clouds still clung stubbornly to the sky, but the horizon had brightened enough to hint at the possibility of a clearing. Mich's gaze roamed over the farmland that began to appear alongside the road. Wide fields bordered by wooden fences, old barns with peeling paint, and the occasional farmhouse with smoke curling from the chimney. Smells like someone's burning wood. Bet it's warm in there, but we're almost at the hotel. Almost there. The town emerged slowly from the surrounding landscape, the buildings clustered together against the backdrop of low hills. Streetlights glowed faintly in the late afternoon gloom, casting soft halos on the wet pavement. Best Western's not far now. When the hotel finally came into view, Mich let out a cheer in her helmet. The Harley purred up to the entrance, its chrome streaked with droplets, the windshield still marked with the faint residue of the earlier rain. We made it. Still blueberries. Yeah, but now we're blueberries with a warm bed waiting for us. Outside, the Harley rested quietly, droplets still clinging to its frame, ready for the next chapter of the journey.
It's over.
It's hard to get out.
That's what she said. Anyhow.
Yeah, it's hard to get off. But we made it, guys. We made it. Yeah. It's been a good ride.
This looks like more like a brand new facility. Look how fancy everything is. This is nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
and
no,
our
this is
breakfast
swank.
place is ready.
You know you're desperate when you say Denny's is swank.
No, that's where we go for breakfast, and I like the breakfast because it's
listen,
simple.
We're lucky to get that, because I never considered all these like hillbilly towns we go to way out in the middle. There's no sense in saying we're up north, because we are literally almost on like the Northwest Territories. That's how far north we are. I thought there would be like Jim's Motel and Bait Shop. That's where I thought we'd be staying.
Yeah,
I never realized it was so built up in a lot of places, so I'm happy with that. So on that note, let's get into it. Peace.
Peace. Mwah. Bye.